polynomial into equal amount of terms. The first thing you do is you take and organize how you're going to do it. Out of the first two terms, I would take out an x squared. What am I left with? X plus 5. The really cool thing is, with the x plus 5, you know what already the second parenthesis set has to be. So I already know out of my second group, this needs to be x plus 5, because they have to match. With that, looking at my numbers, I have an equal 0 still. I need to get some number out here on the outside times the pink to get the part underneath this purple line. So what times x gets me negative 6x? Negative 6. Is negative 6, if I pull it out, times 5 equal to negative 30? So with that, what do I do now?
X squared minus 6.
X squared minus 6 times x plus 5 equals 0. Easiest way to solve these, you're going to take each one. X squared minus 6 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0. And solve them. X plus 5 equals 0 gives you x equals negative 5, which you could have stated right here at the very beginning. On the left one, x squared equals 6, because I'm going to add 6 over. I'm going to add the square root in. X equals plus or minus the square root of 6. I know 6 can't be simplified. I'm done. So your two answers are, three answers, x minus 5 plus or minus root 6.
So where's the 38?
Plus root 6 minus root 6 minus 5. Plus minus is two answers. All right, moving up to the top, example A. On example A, these are just like quadratics. So there's two ways you can do this. You can take the problems and you can rewrite them as a quadratic and do a substitution. I just like doing that because I forget to substitute things back in. What I like to do is just do what we've always done. So here's what you got. You're still going to do your AC method. How many terms are there? There's 3. The first term is 4. The second term is 2. Just like if it was x squared and x. It's exactly half. The middle term is exactly half of it, so this is what you can do. What is 1 times 48?
48.
What are the factors of 48 that add up to be negative 19?
Say it again.
What numbers multiply to get you 48
16 and 3.
that add up to be negative 19? It is 16. They both have to multiply to get to be positive, so they either are both positive or negative. In order to get to add to negative 19, they both are negative. Okay. New part. When we had x squared, what do we break our parentheses down to? X and x. You with me on that? We just cut them in half, really. So what do you think we're going to do with x to the 4th? Cut it in half, x squared and x squared. So what numbers go on the back side? Negative 16, negative 3. There is an equal 0 here that I forgot to write down. So we're going to take x squared minus 16 equals 0. X squared minus 3 equals 0. If you wanted to factor, you could, but what could you do instead? Just solve it. X squared equals 16. Square root, bless you. What's the square root of 16? 4. X squared equals 3. Square root both sides. X equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Questions? Zoe?
So how come for A we did like the X method, but then for B that you did yesterday, you did something different?
You're talking about the quadratic formula?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is why, which part? Are you talking about this part?
Yeah.
Because this isn't factorable.
Okay.
So yesterday when I said, I'm like, you're going to have to do this on cubics, you have to use quadratic formula.
Okay.
If you wanted to, you could use a quadratic formula for both of those. But since they're set up to the solve problems, like what we did with in the solving quadratics, it's just x squared equal and a number. You can just isolate the number and just take the square roots of both sides. You don't have to. For the solving part. For Quartics, you could do the quadratic formula with the quartic, but what would happen is you would get 16 and 3 as your answers, and you would then have to know you have to set both those equal to x squared and then still solve them out, which is a lot more to do.
Yeah.
So you could do the quadratic formula, but it's a lot more steps. And if you want to do that, I can show you one-on-one, but 100% you don't want me doing that as a class.
Okay.
I can, but you don't want me to. I don't want to. All right, what about this one? Whoops, too far. First of all, what should you always keep positive? The highest thing. I always said x squared. In this case, we're going to keep x to the 4th positive. Do not let that one be negative. Okay? So, this is really x to the 4th minus 33x squared plus 200 equals 0. Same thing again. X methods. So 1 times 200 is 200. Adds up to be a negative 33. I know my factors, and I know big numbers, and it's 25 and 8 because I worked with 25 and 8 earlier this morning, so I know it's 25 and 8. But if you don't know your numbers, how do you use your calculator? Yeah, go y equals, type in 200 divided by x, then go second table, and then you're going to find numbers that give you values that get you to 33, which there's 8 and 25. Okay? So this is 8 and 25. They must multiply to get 200, but add up to be negative 33.
It's supposed to be negative.
Negative 8, negative 25. So, once again, parentheses. This equals 0. Didn't forget it that time. I did, but not as bad. No, I don't like it on that side. 0 equals, there we go. What goes in front? X squared and x squared. On your Quartics, we're going to treat them just like quadratics. When we did the factoring, you just get to take it and cut in half. Okay? The other way to know exactly what goes in front, it's also your middle term. They always match up. Okay? So, minus 8, minus 25. So what am I going to do with both of those? X squared minus 8 equals 0. X squared minus 25 equals 0.
On the test, do you have to write that part out?
Yep. Because you're actually going to solve it. And you got to have an equal 0 in there. But the nice thing, on some of the homework, you will have a number in front. It will not lie on that. Maybe. Maybe not. I'll double check here in a second. But normally they should just come out to be x squareds because we're just seeing if you can factor Quartics. But yeah, you got to put those out to be here, and I'll explain why in just a second. Because if you make a sign error here, if this was a positive 8 on accident, or if you wrote it wrong, you would lose the imaginary number. So I need to see all the steps as you're going through. Do we all agree that's plus or minus 5?
Yeah.
That's great. X squared equals 8. Square root both sides. X equals plus or minus square root of 8. Are you done?
No.
Break. Nope. Got to break it down. So, pair of 2's come out. Square root of 2. Plus or minus. Answer. Answer. Sydney?
Why is it 5 and the plus or minus in the
Because I still added square root in.
Okay.
You remember, when we are solving, you're going to always have both the positive and the negative that make it true. If I just said x squared equals the square root of 25 and I already had it in there, it would only be the positive answer. But whenever you add it into the problem, it is always the positive and the negative answer. Other questions? All right, go to your homework. First of all, if you go to page 5, if you literally look at all your Quartics, there are no numbers in front of the x squares, or x to the 4th, excuse me. So you won't have to, Natalie, worry about having to show the simplifying of the dividing out and all that extra stuff. On the Quartics, that might happen in a quadratic, like what we did from yesterday, but you wouldn't have to do it in the Quartic problems. So what we did here, where we just took the factoring and then broke this down and we showed these steps for our solving, that's all you'd have. You won't have to do an extra division out in there, okay? Does that help alleviate that stress? Okay. So my question for you, because I assigned 1, 2, and 3 on the cubics, questions on 1, 2, and 3. Page 3 now. Questions on the cubics. Page 3. My bad. One, 2, and 3. Questions on 1, 2, and 3. All right. We're going to talk about number 4, and we're going to talk about number 6. These are those harder problems. If you also notice that they're not too bad of numbers, but they're different. What's different is there's a number in front of the x cubed, or the variable cubed. So on this problem, I'm going to ask you still the same thing. What cubed gets you the first thing, plus what cubed gets you the second thing? So what value cubed gets you 8? 2. Okay. What value cubed gets you x cubed? Not the 27. I didn't say 27. I said x cubed. Okay. What number times itself 3 times gets you 27? There you go. So your a is just 3x now instead. So you're going to get bigger numbers in the quadratic and everything else. Okay? So that will help you with 6 and 5. If you didn't know that 3 cubed was 27. Factor by grouping questions. You may skip 1 and 2. If you want a challenge, do 1 and 2. If you do not want a challenge, skip them. There are 8 questions. These are those extension questions. Those are the levels that are, hey, I'm getting this, go hard problems. Okay? So if you don't want to do 1 and 2, you do not have to do 1 and 2. But you got to do 3 through 8. That's why there's 8 questions on this one. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Questions on factor by grouping for 3 and 4 if you got to them. We're on page 7 now. All right. So here's your homework. Your homework is all of homework 35. Except what 2 questions do you absolutely don't have to do if you don't want to? 1 and 2 on page 7 you do not have to do if you don't want to.